Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond with your host Robin Hayhurst. In this podcast, Robin will introduce guests that have known failure and want to share their story about how they got through it and what happened next. This will make you learn how to see things from a new perspective and avoid making the same mistakes. Please welcome Robin Hayhurst.
Hello everybody and welcome to Bust and Beyond. I'm being joined today by Stu Davidson. Now Stu's got a few titles, but he is a podcaster like myself. Does the Construction Cashflow Podcast. He's a Chartered Surveyor and he's run a few businesses. So hello Stuart.
Hi Robin, it's really a pleasure to be on. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you. I mean, you've been doing a few things, so I think it's very interesting to speak to. So tell us a bit about yourself, because I always start my podcast with, a bit about you, about how you came into the industry. Did you set out to be in the industry? How did it come about?
I think I got in the wrong queue at university, to be fair, Robin, and I couldn't be bothered to queue up for the other one. So I ended up queuing up for quantity surveying and had to make do with it, really. But joking aside, I suppose when I look back on my life, so I'm 62 now, it's kind of been I've gone broken beyond in each decade, or when I look back, I've kind of had to reinvent myself every decade. So I've kind of changed from one thing to another. So starting off like yourself, when you're our age, or maybe I'm probably quite a bit older than you, Robin, but we start off.
Yeah, we'll just keep that one quiet.
I don't know whether you remember the paper rounds and the milk rounds and that sort of thing we used to do as kids. I don't know where the kids can still do that.
Yeah, but I was posh. I didn't have to do that kind of thing.
Right. You was at the posh end. I remember having this tiny little bike and used to just manage the papers during the week, and I had to cycle out to the farms, which was quite a long way, and I was only a tiny little tot. But when it came to Sunday and everyone had their periodicals, the magazines, the newsagent used to plonk his bag on my bike, and I used to fall off it every time. So I'd kind of wobble along to the nearest farm. They were the worst ones. They had the most periodicals, the farmers. And once I'd done those ones, it wasn't too bad on the way back. So that was my first foray into work. And then I had kidney research. So I was door-to-door kidney research at the age of probably, I don't know, I must have been 12, something like that. And then I used to work as a marshal, well, not marshal, but a little bit of an odd job boy around Brands Hatch. I used to live near there, so I used to do bits and pieces there. Then became a dispatch rider. That was all self-employed stuff, so did that. And then I did an old-fashioned apprenticeship in sheet metal work and welding. And the journeyman that I was under was 85, and he could wield a sledgehammer like anyone's business, So that had some funny stories in it, like the time now they couldn't do this to you now, but it was I decided to clean the teapot out and clean up, this is dirty, all this kind of brown, horrible lining on the inside of this big pot. I'll give that a good clean. So I'll give it a good clean. And when the boss found out, he said, he gave me a right telling off. He said, we've taken years to get it like that and get the flavour. And he said, you've just ruined it. So that was my first experience of my apprenticeship. But did that. Then I did the apprenticeship. And then, like they do, they kick you out, go and learn your trade once you've finished your 4 years. And after a few years, I started my own steelwork business up. I worked on the rigs for a while, so I did that. That was good fun. Air handling units, used to do mechanical engineering in those days. And so I started in the 80s, I had a steelwork business, which I closed down when we hit the recession. So each decade tends to have a bit of a cycle, doesn't it? And it is, you're always kind of trying to step beyond bust, I suppose. I suppose I would say I'm a little bit of a risk taker, and I like to try new things. So I went on I did a 2-year course in building studies, H&D, went on to get a degree in quantity surveying, worked various different roles, estimating, contracts, management, and then became a chartered quantity surveyor in 2002. So then I went on to work in some of the consultancies in London, Turner and Townsend, Gardner and Theobald, those kinds of companies for quite a few years. And 2010, I started my own practice.
So 2002, I mean, that's quite late on in life. A bit like myself getting chartered. I think I was around about the same time. Yeah, I was definitely a late starter. I mean, you talk about doing your first job. My first job was working on building sites. So though I'd lived in the posh end of the street, definitely, I used to work on my dad's building sites. So all my holidays and stuff like that. And the other thing you said was about wielding a hammer. I remember my wife doing a bit of gardening and saying, well, could do putting a bit, a few pegs in here and putting a little bit of an edge in him. So I bought some pegs and a bit of an edge in, and I was whacking these pegs, and I thought, I'm bloody good at this. God, these are going right in where I want them. And God, I found something I'm good at. And then I suddenly thought, hold on, I spent 3 years working as an engineer. I must have put about 4,000 pegs in a year. So I have a skill which I didn't know. If you want a peg put in and you want to put it in accurately and, just spot on and the right level and everything, I'm your man. I have a skill.
Yeah. There you go. There's another side shoot there, another stream of income possibly. I don't actually know anyone around who's doing that these days. So yeah, maybe it's a joint venture, that one.
Absolutely. I always had a lot of roads.
I always ended up every now and again, I'd overswing and hit my shin or something, and or hit someone else's shin.
Yeah, I don't think in all that time I ever hit my hit my thumb, but my thumb's normally well out of the way. But yeah, we put some big pegs in, and because in those days we just started working with coordinates for setting out. So the other thing, I've always loved maths. Don't know why. Don't know where I got that from. Most probably a teacher I had called Mrs. Robinson. I remember her well. She was the maths room. I always had the sun on my back, and she was a really good teacher. And you couldn't fall asleep in her class. It was like death. It was really good. And I've always loved maths because of that. So I got a programmable calculator and I programmed it to work out the coordinates. So suddenly from a half a day to a day's work working out all the coordinates, we were doing it in like an hour. And oh God, I wasn't very old then. Must have been 19, 20. So, early days, one of the first EDMs in the country we were using. So,
it was. So those that are out there using total stations, remember where it first came from.
Yeah.
Robin Hayhurst on his, programming his calculator. So, well done. That's great. I mean, I remember we used to go around with a dumpy level and take days to do stuff that they do in about an hour now. It's amazing.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's all changed and it's a lot more accurate. I mean, we also used one of the very early drain lane lasers, and it used to wobble. We couldn't work out why it's wobbling. We got a few people down to have a look at it. And in the end, it was we had to blow cold air through the pipes to make them so they weren't warm. It was the heat in the pipes that was diffracting the laser. So it wasn't accurate. It was an interesting time anyway, all these new gadgets, unlike other industries where there'd be, robots building things. We were, it was a single laser wobbling, that was it.
Yeah. But, that's one thing about the construction industry. We quite often get, we're looked at as in certain ways, our culturally, we haven't changed in many ways. But then, I've seen lately that from a technological perspective, it's made some massive advancements, and attitudes have changed in certain respects, and particularly around safety and around planning a job and about how we treat our workers in a way, I think has improved too in terms of what it used to be. But I think there's still a long way to go, particularly around the cash flow culture in construction. But there's a few little white elephants in the room that I know I keep harping on about that, whether we'll see that change, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, cash flow is your subject, and I think it's a really important one. I speak to lots and lots of construction and development business owners, and lots of them don't even run a cash flow. You get the odd person that doesn't know what cash flow forecast is. Rare, but you do get them. And it's just a big bulk of excuses normally. So I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict it. How do I know what jobs I'm going to win? But we're all in construction. We're brilliant at firefighting because we're used to it raining for 2 weeks and not being to get on. We're used to snowing. We're used to deliveries not turning up, people not turning up. We're good at firefighting, but we still have a program. Or most good companies have a program, because I have come across companies that don't run programs either. But, a program is a guess, but it's something to kind of bolt everything else to. And same thing with the cash flow forecast.
It goes more in, I'm kind of interested in the construction industry as a whole, how we cash flow the industry, which is slightly a different dynamic to individual companies' cash flow. But you're exactly right. You do need cash flow forecast. And many business owners become too busy to look at the numbers every day. And particularly I noticed if you've come off the tools, you've built your business up, you're quite interested in the nuts and bolts, you're interested in the quality of your work, the safety, you're interested in, you spending quite a bit of time, as you mentioned, getting the guys there on a Monday. So all of this stuff is going on, and you think, I'll just look at, no, I was going to look at the cash flow. I'll tell you what, I'll look at it at the end of the week, or, if you've got a cash flow forecast. But it's so important to keep an eye on it, enough so that you're carrying around the key numbers in your head. So you can kind of get a feel for things are happening on site or on a project that, you kind of know where it is, and then you think, there's a red flag there. I'm going to go back and have a look in detail just to see what we need to do to correct this issue that's going on. So, yeah, so I would say with business owners, individual business owners, in terms of cash flow and knowing your numbers, that I always say to a business owner, and this comes out of my own experience really in a way, that if you know your exit strategy when you set your business up, always have an exit strategy, because that way everything works towards that. So you have to have a plan, you have to have a cash flow that gives you that result of that exit strategy, and think about it as if, so if I was going to buy a business today, I wasn't starting my own business, but I was going to go and buy one, you'd do your due diligence on that business. You'd have to know a little bit about the balance sheet. You'd have to know a little bit about the cash flow forecast. You need to have a little bit know about their supply chains, who their suppliers are, what their product lines are, who's running it, who the employees are. You do all of these kind of things and run your own KPIs and metric on it. But quite often we don't do the same due diligence on our own businesses. So it could be that we leave it too late to take corrective action. So a cash flow forecast can take, a cash flow forecast can be a spreadsheet, or it can be something very, very simple. Or as complex as you want. You could start running net present value calculations and all these sorts of things, and a number of passes. And, it can get as complicated as you want. But basically knowing the numbers, what's coming in, what's going out, when's it coming in, when's it going out, just knowing when you're overstepping the mark a little bit. But have that exit strategy. It's very important, because I can't see how you can have a business plan, and out of a business plan comes a cash flow forecast, if you haven't got an exit strategy. What's my exit strategy going to be? I mean, in my case, one of the mistakes I made in my last business that I'd closed down was I just hung on to it too long because I didn't have a proper exit strategy. I just kept it going much longer than it should have kept going. When I could have been doing something else with my life, I just spent all my energy, time and effort trying to keep the show on the road, if you like. And in the end, I had to do a director's duty, which was to, there was more money going out than coming in. So, legally obliged to wind it up. And that's what I had to do. But I did know my numbers. So probably I wound it up before it got any worse than it was. I'm not saying it wasn't bad, but, I did allow it to get worse a bit, because I kind of hoping that I'd get through it. Oh, next week we'll have a job come in, or next week we'll have a job come in, or, but it didn't, and I was kind of hanging on. In the end, I had to take a step back from it. And that's the thing, take a step back from your numbers, don't take it personally. And it's not your business is not you, it's not you as a person, it's not who you are. And the problem is we tend to identify ourselves with our job or with our business. And that's who we are. We go to a networking and, people say, what do you do? Who are you? What are you? Oh, I'm a business owner. So that's one of the things I hesitate now to say, you're a chartered surveyor or what you. I kind of think, well, what if I don't really, who am I? Who am I really, as a person? It's easy enough to say I'm a chartered surveyor or I own a business. But with the numbers, you've got to look at it from a business perspective, and it's not your baby. It's a business, and I think I fell into that.
I agree and kind of disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this saying, isn't there, that says it's not personal, it's just business. And I would answer, it's my business, so it is bloody personal, So, and I was toning it down because it's not the word I normally use. But what you talk about, and you were talking about then, was KPIs.
Yeah.
Now, KPIs are really interesting, and I wasn't interested enough in KPIs. I didn't understand the value of a KPI in fixing a problem. Not just telling you what's happening, but fixing a problem. And the right KPIs tell you what's going wrong in your business and where you're losing money and loads of different pieces. I was with a client the other day, I'm not going to name them. Fantastic business, by the way, this particular client. And he said, yeah, I don't think I've got the KPI bit. And I also know he listens to this podcast. So I don't think I've got the KPI bit buttoned down. And then I sat there and I listened to his team at their team meeting, because I sometimes sit with my clients through their team meetings. Report KPI after KPI after KPI. They had done a really dynamic team. They'd done a really fantastic job. They understood where every lead came from. They understood how sites were progressing. Yeah, they could add a few more KPIs in there and they can, present them slightly differently, but they had a really good handle on what they're reporting back. And it was all KPIs. So KPIs are hugely important. And one of the things that's taught me about KPIs, much more than I did before, was actually stepping outside of the industry. So a lot of what I do now is I work with construction companies. I help them grow. I help them solve problems. I help them get leads. I help them put systems in place. But because I am looking for a different type of client for myself now, I use things called funnels and emails, and it's all marketing. And funnels are really important when you want to learn about KPIs, because you can't just set up a funnel, which is, by the way, most people are in a funnel somewhere. So it's basically you give your email address and you get a series of emails, or you might have landing pages and all kinds of things you look at. But if you know all your stats for every single section along the funnel, how many people open the emails, how many people hit the landing page, how many people click on the advert, all that kind of stuff, you learn where it's going wrong and what to fix. Yeah. So what it gives you is really clear indication of what you need to fix to get it right. Well, you can do that with the construction company as well. But it's so obvious with this, what do you do? And then after you've run a few funnels, you know the percentages you're looking for. So you know that 30% of the people that land on landing page will sign up, if it's a really good landing page. If you're at 5%, the landing page is rubbish. So, you know to fix it. So exactly the same thing with your construction company. So where are your leads coming from? Who are going through to sales? What's your win rate? Win rates are really important. What's your average monthly overhead as a percentage against monthly turnover? All these kind of things are really useful to people and can really help them run their business. But you've got to measure them. But they don't take a lot of measuring, because most of those facts and figures you kind of know.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Robin. Particularly win rate. If you're a construction company and you're thinking about what projects you're going to tender for, you can categorize it then, can't you? These are the ones we're winning. These are the ones we're losing. These are the ones we're winning, we're not making money on. These are the ones we're winning, we're making money on. Again, it helps you to look at your business, because I like your idea of the funnel and KPIs on the funnel. Because if you can get to a point where you know how much it's costing you to get the leads in the top and how much you're making at the bottom, so you could get to a point where if you've got it off to a fine art, which is the goal, I suppose, to, it's like going to a cash point and putting £1 in and getting £2 out, that's the point. But you can only get to that point in a funnel when you've measured everything, you've got your KPIs, and ultimately that's where you want to get to. I suppose it's easier to do one if you're selling widgets than if you're doing a construction company where things are shifting about all the time, But yeah, I like your idea. I had a guy called Joe Lynch, marketing consultant, on my podcast around construction, and he was talking about a similar thing, and to keep that marketing effort going all the time, because quite often you find smaller construction companies, their marketing kind of takes a back seat while they've got projects on. They get to the end of the project and they're running after work. Then they're accepting work and tendering for work that's not really within their core values or their core expertise, and then they're setting themselves up for a difficult project, the project from hell, if you like. So keep that marketing going. Keep, making sure that you're tendering with contractors that share your values, they're tried and tested, you're happy, and that the work you'll be doing is the work that you can excel at and really sell yourself.
I totally agree. I mean, the biggest impact you can have on your win rate is by turning work away. So that is so alien to some people. So if you are being used as a test price and you're pretty sure, you can take a commercial decision and go, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I might have a small chance of winning it. But actually, as an effect on your win rate, that is going to bring your win rate down. So if you just make it kind of simple, if you want to get, say, £1 million worth of work and your win rate is 20%, you've got to tender £5 million worth of work to get the 1 million. That's a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to tender, you're going to go, spend time on. It's a lot of money. So win rate of 20% is too low. So why are you only winning 20%? Is it because, and let's not focus on price, by the way. Price is important to a point, but, your branding, other things that back that price up, that people want you to do the job. This is very important. But also, are you tendering stuff that you're not going to win in a million years? It's all right to do that if it's a commercial decision, you're aware of it. But generally, you don't want to be. You want to be tendering what you've got a chance of winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes some working out sometimes, doesn't it? And how many times have we tendered for stuff that we think we're on a winner? We've worked with a company before. We've ticked all the boxes. We're getting all the right sounds coming out. And then come the judgment day, oh, sorry, you just didn't get it this time. And you've already done the tender. You've gone up to site. You may have had a meeting. You've done all that cost and expense. And if you've got to do that 5-6 times to get a job, you've got to have quite a big resource, reserve really to, particularly if you're...
Well, and margin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the problem. I remember tendering a job. It's a few £1 million for, we won't name them, but a very large housing association, National Housing Association. Now, I found out that 8 companies tendered. I think it cost us, without my time and the time of my surveyor, but generally about £5,000 to tender it. We had to have something written, and quality stuff and other things. And at the end of the tender process, I think we came second. Then we kind of reverted to first because we said, well, let's meet, let's value engineer it. Let's see what we can do to move it forward anyway. And then they said, actually, we're not moving it forward because everyone's too expensive. And, that's £40,000 of SME money that they've just kind of pissed away. Okay, no cost to them, when actually someone could have told them. They could have gone out to someone, that could have told them what the value was, that it wasn't viable for them. So I wrote, because I get quite cross about these things, I wrote to the board at this particular housing association. To be fair, someone phoned me within about a few hours, actually, I think, of my email going off, and apologised profusely and said they were thinking about legal action against the people that had, been their consultants on it. But that doesn't help. They're getting funding. A lot of this is funded by the government, particularly Housing Association. They're getting funding, and the government's ethos is to support SMEs. This really was a terrible blow to a lot of SMEs. So it is a problem. So you've really got to look at stuff and go, look, are we going to get it? What's the chance of us getting it? And have a list and a criteria. So some of my clients go, if I haven't met the client, they can't invest the time to meet me before I tender, I'm not tendering it. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it is one approach to doing it. And then, and the same with, say, an architect sending you a package. If it's out of the blue and they say, oh, can you tender this for us? You've got to think, well, hold on, am I just a test price? Am I going to be tendering this £1 million or £2 million job? Is it what I normally do? Is it the size of project I normally do? So you should have a criteria, a list of things that you can tick off saying that this is right for me.
Yeah. And for a lot of contractors, subcontractors, it's a gamble, isn't it? It's a gambling game. Although we talk about KPIs, we try and narrow that gamble down a bit. I'd like to see, and I put my QS hat on, some of the most successful projects that I've been able to procure have paid the tenderers for their time to tender the project. And because I'm a great believer that somebody has to know what's in the building. Somebody has to know the quantities of everything in the building, whether it's the client issues a bill of quantities or the tenderers do their own measure. I understand that there's a lot of work that goes into a tender, and if you've got 8 tenderers, as you mentioned, they're all looking at their project, depending on how detailed the tender documents are. Sometimes they'll be pricing on the same basis and somebody else has done a bill of quantities. Quite often they're sent out on drawings and spec, and each contractor's going to come up with different quants, so it's all going to be all over the show anyway. So I think it's, if you can say to a tenderer, I always think early engagement with contractors as well is great, because you can get a better understanding of the design, what can be done, what can't be done, what they fancy, what they don't fancy. And sometimes it's a bit of I'm not saying all architects, because some architects are actually brilliant at it, but some architects just need a little bit of a reality check sometimes, with certain trades and certain interfaces that they think can click together like Lego, which don't actually happen. But I'd like to see more contractor involvement, particularly supply networks involvement early doors. I remember years ago, I worked on the Science and Technology building. I procured that for Coventry University. And I don't know whether you've seen that building. It's quite iconic. It's got sloping facades and they're all hexagonal. It's got a hexagonal external envelope or hexagonal openings for the windows and the brise-soleil. And the original design was cantilevered concrete slabs to get the slope. And being the QS on there, I was at loggerheads with some of the design team, as I quite often found myself in that position. Well, yeah, great design, but we're not going to get it built for the budget. And part of my job was really, I suppose, building relationships on the basis that you're holding a poison chalice, and still getting people to work with you. But what I suggested is let's just make it a nice, just a square box with no cantilevers. And what we'll do is we'll create the diagonal out of timber. And I got a timber specialist in. We had a couple of meetings and we designed, and that whole facade is designed with glulam beams, etc. So it lightened, the whole building was lighter. It was easier to construct. We managed to get it into budget. And that was all because we brought the subcontractor in, or shall I say specialist contractor in early stage. And other times we've paid for, if they're contributing to the design like that, there's no reason why they can't get paid for their time. And I'm a great believer in that because, otherwise what you're doing is you're not only, I don't want to creep off into the subject of, where tier ones use the supply chain as a cash cow, but maybe that's for later. But, not only are they doing that, they're expecting the supply network to price the job up, not so much the tier ones, but the developers are expecting the supply network to price the job up free of charge. And as you mentioned earlier, it's hard to, if you're in a specialist contractor, it's hard to maintain your margin, with the risk, because it's a high risk process. And also with the amount of tendering you have to do it that eats directly into your bottom line. So, if there's a message I could give to tier ones and developers, there's nothing wrong with paying for somebody for their time to give you some early input, to start pricing the job up together, to understand the quantities in the job, to understand the complexities around interfaces, to understand the complexities around parts of the products that need to be ordered off site. And also, what's the labour? What level of skill do we need with the labour with this particular device and project? And is that labour force available locally? So you don't know that otherwise.
Yeah, I totally see that. And for those listeners that aren't used to the construction speak, because there are a few,
sorry about that.
Fine. I mean, it's an interesting subject. The construction industry has got problems, and the big contractors who make a very small margin do tend to do everything they can to protect that margin and beyond. And one of the things they do is 60, 90-day payments and all this kind of thing. And I worked for a very large developer for a few years. They were particularly difficult to work with because I was in project management, so I was a site manager for them. And they just didn't trust their site managers. So they relied on the surveyors to do the kind of hard graft in controlling the site, which is a mistake because they haven't got any idea of quality. And also they had too many rules. So I literally lost out on this is 100 and something units that have the site. I lost out on a painter over £500. He was £500 more than the next painter down, for over that kind of sum. And I knew he was brilliant. And the one that was lower by £500, I knew was rubbish. And we got the rubbish one. And the attitude was, well, we'll give you who we give you. It's your job to get the quality up. Mm. But that particular, in those days, there was a few things going wrong with that company. And there was a few people buying work through contract managers, etc. So it wasn't a nice atmosphere to work in. And it was very much how the industry was at the time. I would hope that, it's definitely the bit of the industry that I live in at the moment is a lot cleaner than that and a lot better. But yeah, the construction industry has had its problems and still has. But a lot of this is led by clients. So clients try and those clients might be tier ones. They might be, so tier one is a very, very large contractor, or it might be developers, or it might be private clients who are employing someone, but they kind of enjoy this race to the bottom and they don't understand the value they're getting out. So if you pay rubbish money, you're either going to have a very aggressive contractor who's trying to get the money back because he's not going to make any, or you get a rubbish quality because he cannot produce the quality for that kind of money. And you lose out at the end of the day as a client if you don't take the attitude that you're looking for quality. I used to say to subcontractors, and I said to quite a few, look, I'm quite happy to make a profit. So you've made a profit on this job. You've priced it in. I'm going to do everything I can to help you protect that profit. That's fine. I'm paying you, but I'll help protect that profit. But I don't want you to increase that profit. Okay. If, having said that, we start building another house, then of course you increase your profit. But it's a margin, percentage of margin. I don't want you to increase that profit. So I don't want you to do anything stupid, and I won't do anything stupid. And we used to kind of, we cleared the air, and that kind of got us moving forward. But it is a complex industry, and I think it's very different from almost every industry I know.
Yeah, it is. And we don't often talk, you mentioned about margins, and I know margins are talked about a lot, in industry. We have to understand the business agenda of the different levels of participants and players within the construction industry. Now, quite often, specialist contractors' margins would be higher than a main contractor's margin or a tier one margin. And you wonder, that's a bit strange. What's going on there? Well, a couple of things. A specialist needs to have a decent margin because quite often they're in a high risk position, and those margins can get eroded. Up the chain a bit more, let's take a tier one, which is a large main contractor, for example. Some of them have, and I talk about cash farming quite a lot, a thing called cash farming, and I'll explain that in a minute, and robbing Peter to pay Paul. So basically, a tier one, some of the tier ones, the large tier ones in the country have grown as large as they have because they've used money from their construction arms to fund investments for buying land and buying buildings to develop. So they're interested in cash, generating cash more than they are margins. So their margins might be 1-2%, but that's okay. As long as they're breaking even, that's fine because they're generating cash. So their idea, so they want to negotiate as long a payment terms down the line, down through the supply network as they possibly can, and as shorter negotiated terms with their developer client or their investor this side. So they can expand out the length of time which they can hold the cash. So they'll go and they'll take that cash, they make the investment, they reliquidate it, and then they bring the cash back. So the longer the time, so it all kind of starts from there. But they also, on top of that, they're using the supply network to manage that cash flow. So it's a little bit of a red herring when they talk about, when tier one start talking about, we're working on really low margins. Well, yes, because their business plan is not making money on margins. It's making money on generating cash. So why can't they? So my answer to that is come clean with the business plan. Why don't we join the mission statements up of the individual companies within that supply, when we're going to construct a building, we're going to develop a property. The mission statement of the developer, the mission statement of tier one, and the mission statement of the supply chain, because we all need to really understand why we're all there and how we operate as a single unit. It's almost like having a football team where, the front, the strikers are not talking to the midfield, and the midfield's not talking to the defence, and defence not talking to the goalkeeper. We all got different agendas. You can see what chaos it brings. And we can see the chaos within the construction industry that brings in delays, disputes and disruption, long payment, this no payment, this slow payment culture in construction.
It's more terminal than that. I mean, I look back 10 years, all the companies that I worked with, I competed against 10 years ago. They're not here anymore. Because sooner or later, they get caught out with the cash flow conundrum, and they stop trading. That's not a good way for an industry to be. And I'm not saying other industries aren't affected. I'm sure they are. But we work with lots of people who have lots of money to spend, but it's not necessarily their own money. So they're very haphazard about how they do that. So we're in a situation, very large contract. There's mistakes I made within that contract, but we were going to be over budget to finish. Was it our fault? Of course it was. But, at the end of the day, we were going to be over budget to finish. So they ended up not paying us. and then getting another contractor in on a cost plus basis to finish the job. It's 110% sure it would be cheaper just to bear with us. You know, I'm 110% sure of that, but that's what they did. And these are people that I think it's not their own money. They get a bit spiteful sometimes, as you know. And let's be very clear about this. It was my fault we were in that position. No one else's. I don't blame anyone else for that. Yeah. But the people we're working with could have taken another attitude, another approach, could have seen a bigger picture, a larger picture, and there would have been a different outcome. But they didn't. But the way I see that is that people are it's not their own money. They're not accountable to a lot in lots of ways. They'll say they are, but they're not. And they can't see the bigger picture often. And I've seen it often get very personal, between CEOs and MDs and project managers and it all becomes very difficult. But I think that's very much how the industry is, and it can be like that, as opposed to, Mr. A decides to get his extension bill. It's his money. He's earned that money. He's very careful how he spends it, but he's very careful about decisions he makes that are going to cost him more money, because he's earned that money. So it can be very different, but the industry does kind of suffer a lot from that.
Yeah, it does. And and you're exactly right. Sometimes the large contractors is not their money. They don't see the human side to their decisions. And I think that's something that the industry really needs to wake up to, that, we are seeing a disproportionate amount of construction businesses going bust, specialist contractors going bust, where they are forced into receivership through certain shenanigans. And, you and I probably know all the tricks and things that they use in order to, particularly if they owe, they'll get their valuations. Each valuation, they'll just pay just slightly bit less, and then it builds up till they owe them quite a bit of money. And then they'll make it impossible for them to remain on the project, or they'll find a way of getting them in breach of contract. And they'll bring, like you mentioned, they'll bring another company on. They get rid of this one because they owe them so much money, and they don't have to pay that back, and they'll get the work done cheaper. So they don't see the misery that they cause from forcing someone out of business, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, and even retention, which is a huge hurdle to our industry getting itself sorted. Even retention, which people see, if we question the contract and we can get out of this contract, we can keep the retention. But they're not understanding that the contractor's taking the retention because he's taking out the subcontractors, and it's all these little subcontractors that suffer because they don't get the retention back. So yeah, it's a complicated industry with complicated problems. But I actually think as an industry, we need to turn around and start saying, no, not working for you. You've got a bad rep.
Yeah.
You've done this before, and, we're not working with you. However desperate you are, I often say to someone, okay, it's £1 million job, but, you're going to end up making £150,000 loss. So you're better off doing the job or not doing the job, do you think? Should you just get,
well, you can sit at home and go bust,
because you can get £100,000 and go and burn it. That's a quick way of getting rid of £100,000. Or so sometimes you just got to make sure that you can't do that. But the other challenge in the industry is that people don't know their numbers, and they don't know what their hourly rates are. They don't know how to calculate them. They're tradespeople, very good tradespeople that go, oh, right, okay, I'm good at this, I'm going to start a business. And that's a completely different skill set. I'm not saying you can't learn it. You absolutely can, but you've got to be open to learn it, not just go, I'm going to work really hard and that'll do it. And you can learn something from books, totally understand that, some good books out there. But, you need to learn these things. You need to learn how to run a business. And there is some stuff that doesn't come out of books very easily that you need to know that will make a big difference about how you run your business and whether you're going to survive that 5-year, that deadly 5-year thing where I think just under 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years.
And, I think I'm a great believer, or now I am, of taking time out each year just to take stock of just step back and think about, what you are doing in life, building your business around your life or your work around your life, understanding who you are, and having a look to see, well, what other, giving yourself time to pick up what other skills do I need, or what other skills do I need to bring into the business to make it work. Because quite often you can get so embroiled into it that you can't see the wood for the trees, and sometimes you can toil away at a business for years and years and years and not find yourself, lose yourself. Well, who am I? I'm head to the grindstone every day. And, but life is much more than that, and I think particularly for business owners, take some time out, take a whole month, a year, where you take some time out. Am I still doing the right thing? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to change? Who do I need to bring in? Who do I need to?
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't say take a month out, but you need time away. I find that even doing what I'm doing now, which I absolutely love, but I'm blazing a new route for myself. If I can get a few days away, my brain starts ticking into what I need to do, what I need to change. But if you're working in it, it doesn't. And for business owners, now I'm just about to do the first time ever a blatant advertisement. Okay, so it's a blatant advertisement. But for business owners who, really need that vision, that focus, what I've always advised and have done, and really I'm getting to nitty gritty of delivering it really well for people is to build their 5-year company. So if they build their 5-year company, what their company is really going to be like in 5 years' time. So that means stepping back from your company now and understanding where you're going to go. But every single role, all the costs, where you're going to get your work from, everything. If you can build that, then basically all the steps you make, every decision you make in the next 5 years is towards that. It's towards a 5-year company. It dictates your decisions. It dictates what you're going to do. You can change your vision of your 5-year business, but you're moving towards something. And I happen to be running a workshop in January. It's going to be an in-person workshop just outside Stevenage. Very nice location. So if anyone's interested in going on that, it'll be a day, including lunch, with other contractors. You're welcome to join us. Let me know by in December, and we can talk about getting you booked onto that. But yeah, I'm running a workshop because I feel that having that vision for your business and having every decision work towards that vision is so important. Sorry for the advertisement, but I just thought it's something I'm.
Hey, no. And I'd just like to back that up. If you're a contractor, especially subcontractor watching this, really do make a serious attempt to get there, because Robin's really good. He's been in the industry so long and he's had the experience. He knows what it's like to run a business. He knows what goes wrong with a business. So if anyone's going to give you some guidance, don't pay the costly price of learning by experience, but just come to Rob's workshop and make your 5-year plan.
That's very kind of you, Stu. But anyway, I've never done an advert in my podcast. So for those who hate it, it's not a sponsored podcast, so I just forgive me for that. But I'm quite passionate about helping people. And this is something I've been doing with my clients for a couple of years now, and it's such a powerful thing for them. So, I thought, why not allow people to just do it on a one-off? Come and see me, have the day with me, we'll work at it. If you want to work with me beyond that, fantastic. If you don't, that's fine as well. Just take the value and go. So where were we? We're talking about vision and everything else before I.
Vision, yeah.
So you've run a few businesses, Stu, and you say that you've failed at the business once a decade. So apart from having your exit plan, and I would say to you, exit plan or 5-year plan, you've got to know where you're going. That's a really important thing. What things, if you had to have, and I always ask people this at the end of the podcast, what 3 things would you say people should do to avoid failure?
What a very good question. Yeah, to avoid failure. Well, I think the idea about failure is something failure is a difficult one, because sometimes success can be a failure or failure can be a success. They kind of live together in a certain way, depending on how you label it. So some failures actually lead to success. But having said that, but taking in the context of your question, to avoid failure. So I think we're running a business. Have a look, and you can find, particularly in Robin's coaching, he takes you through it. But if you work out, say, for example, you're going to go and buy a business from scratch. And I know, Robin, you mentioned that 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So one of the options is to buy a business, buy a construction business that's an ongoing business. But even if you're starting from scratch, I would look into find out how you buy a business, find out how you do due diligence for a business. And I wished on my business, I thought, do you know what? because I spent a bit of time, I did some property sourcing, I did some business sourcing. And when I did the business sourcing, I learned how to source businesses and do due diligence on businesses. And I thought, do you know what? I wish I'd done the due diligence on my own business, because I think that would have set it up and put it on a much better footing. So exactly what you say, Robin, in terms of planning your business first, your 5-year plan. If you, as a business owner, even if you have a business now, have a look, see if you can find out what the requirements are to buy a business, and then match that up with your business, and to see if you would buy your own business. So I think that's the first one. Would you buy your own business? That would be the first part of the advice. The other one, very, very important, is if you're running a business, as you're growing, as you're scaling, you get to a point where you're trusting people to be client facing. And I made this mistake. I systemized my business. I stepped back from it. I put people in that I trusted to do client facing work. And in the end, as that turned out, I lost touch with the business. I was no longer the spider in the middle of the web, if you like. I was relying on others. Although I did have KPIs in and people were reporting to me, it wasn't 100% watertight. But I would say always keep your clients, keep your relationship with your clients. They're yours. No matter whether you've got an accountant in place, a CEO in place, et cetera, your key clients are your key clients. They're the people that you built relationships with. Always have the closest relationship with your clients. I found the hard way that there was at the end of the day, people are human beings, they feather their own nests at the end of the day. When push comes to shove, you need to be the one that's got the client relationship, even if there's an interface with the client, with your staff, make sure you've got the closest relationship. And the other one, I would say your supply network, because we talked about cash flow anyway, but supply network, have a really good relationship with your supply network. Make sure that you've got that really good relationship, that when the chips are down, you need supplies, you need to deliver, they're going to think of you first. So look after your supplies, look after your supply chain, particularly look after the people that are working for you and with you, to make it a business, because people are not just in it for the money, but they like to be seen. So make sure that everyone in your organisation is seen. Make sure that they feel special, and make sure nobody's struggling, that everyone's supporting each other.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I think that's really good advice. And I think that, the thing about losing touch with your businesses and your clients is, very relevant, I think, to a lot of people who'd like to take a step back from their business, and trying to get the right KPIs, which can be of help with that, are important, and seeing how your clients have been handled without having to do the day-to-day. So I think that's challenging. But thank you ever so much for coming. It's been really interesting chatting to you, and I look forward to listening to your podcast in the future.
You're welcome.
I'm hoping that people have got lots of value out of this one.
I'm sure they have. Thank you so much for inviting me, Robin. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Bust and Beyond with Robin Hayhurst. Be sure to tune in next time and visit his website at robinhayhurst.com.